Thank you for joining us for the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, Wednesday, June 12th meeting. I'd like to call to order.
Thank you. To start the meeting, I'd like to go ahead and confirm that we have a quorum by doing a roll call for attendance. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Present. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do the roll call, actually, if we could have the interpreter please explain how to use the interpretation function for the meeting.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles, haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom desde su celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now go ahead with the roll call. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Present. For CEO Private Sector, Sunny House. Here. Contractor Construction is absent. For Finance and Budgeting, Miriam Babaki. Here. For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Frank Rivera.
Here.
And Licensed Engineer and Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition are absent. I'd like to note that the terms of Chair Frankel and Les Hopper ended on May 31st, 2024. The reappointment of Chair Frankel and Les Hopper is in progress and is expected to be completed by the end of this month. But as a result, Chair Frankel cannot attend today's meeting as an ITALK member. The immediate past chair, Sunny House, has volunteered to act as chair for today's meeting, and the committee can confirm this temporary appointment by unanimous consent. All members in support, please say yay.
Hey.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and hand the meeting over to Ms. House. Thank you.
Thank you. Supposed to go sit there, I guess. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, committee, for voting me in temporarily. Okay, so let me get my feet under me first. Where are we on the agenda? See, we did the interpreter. And welcome everyone to this ITALK meeting. And I think we are going to first find out if there are any public comments. Is that our next thing? Yes. So are there any public comments?
Chair, real quick,
Sorry, go ahead.
Adrian has an announcement on how to make public comments.
Okay, perfect. Could you please do that?
Thank you, Chair. We will take both in-person and virtual public comments, as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. In addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you'll receive upon registering. When the public comments are called for an item on the Zoom link, on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you're participating by phone, press *9. The chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. The instructions providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we can get started. Do we have any public comments at this time?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment, the original draw. You can go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say, as far as, transparency goes and everything, with Andre still, being in this business, because this is a business, and dealing with money and doing anything that has to do with SANDAG when he's engaged in such fraud, waste, and abuse that has caused so many issues for SANDAG, and even led to the firing of an employee who's bringing forward information. And, it's kind of interesting because it's like what was said is that she didn't go through the, fraud, waste, and abuse hotline or whatever to bring this forward. But I mean, nothing's being done about a woman being fired for doing the right thing and trying to make sure that what was going on wasn't going to happen anymore, that could be mitigated, that to make sure that the public were aware of it. And she was retaliated against by Andre and Hassan and the upper management. So it's interesting that Andre can still be there, is going to be retiring soon, but he shouldn't even be able to do that because he's going to collect his pension. I mean, he's gotten crazy raises over the last 5 years, and more than probably, I don't know, I'd have to look at other raises, but I mean, it's pretty crazy to think about how much money has gone into his pockets for engaging in such negligence. And so it seems that, I don't know why people are protecting him, but it doesn't lead for, the public to have trust in you guys when that continues to take place, and the people that have been engaged in those things are still there, still able to, seemingly mess with what's going on from this time forward until he leaves. So I don't know if part of that is trying to hide things that may come out after he's gone. But if you want people to trust you, I wouldn't be having him have anything to do with what you're doing.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to now hear from Victoria regarding agency updates. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman House. As many of you must be aware, Friday is Colleen Clemenson's last day as SANDAG's interim CEO. Our new CEO, Mario Orsa, will be joining SANDAG on Monday, June 17th. Mario has been working with SANDAG teams and meeting with Colleen to prepare for his first day as our new CEO. Over the last few weeks, Colleen has been presenting to several external audiences that will be attending this week's Tribal Summit, where we'll discuss collaborative climate, energy, and public safety efforts between tribal governments and SANDAG. Last month, the board approved a $1.3 billion budget for FY25 that invests in more than 200 projects across the region, including agency priorities like the TransNet Major Corridors projects, Losan Realignment, Otamesa East, the Purple Line, and the Blue Line Express. After sharing the initial concept for the draft 25 regional plan earlier this year, the team is now hard at work doing the preliminary modeling to determine if we will meet the 19% GHG reduction goals. Likewise, the environmental process for the Losan Rail realignment began on June 4th, and this initiated a 45-day public comment period. This is a huge milestone in advancing the long-term solution for the corridor. At the same time, the work continues the 5th phase of the stabilization project at Delmar Bluffs. On the airport transit connection, we're continuing to gear up for our travel study this summer, and we'll provide a post-pandemic travel data. This will provide post-pandemic travel data critical for modeling for the project. And as I mentioned at your last meeting, or someone did, hopefully, we continue to work through many complex negotiations regarding Otamesa East. These negotiations will help us begin construction as soon as possible. Finally, the SR 125 continues to be a priority as staff work through the action plan to transition the new back office system and ensure the integrity of our customer accounts in the interim. We'll continue to keep you updated on the progress at future meetings. And this concludes my agency report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments, any public comments? No? Okay. Any questions or comments from the members? Okay. All right, we will move on. Before we get into the consent items, I want to remind everyone that we have several vacancies on the ITALK committee. Two are going to be new positions. We are looking for someone with who has done management of large-scale construction contracts to replace Pedro. So I know SANDAG has made some announcements, and I asked members of ITALK as well to reach out to your contacts to make sure we can fill that position. We also have received a resignation from Les Hopper. So even though he was going to be reappointed, the position of licensed engineer now is open. And when is that is that already been announced or advertisement yet? What's the
It has
plan?
not been announced or advertised. We are actually still working with Les to see if he may be able to attend the meetings virtually due to his situation.
Okay,
So that is still in progress. However, that position will most likely become available in the near term before his
Okay.
term is up. So we're
Okay.
still working with him on his position.
thank you. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact that we're missing our chair. And he was not able to be here because his reappointment did not take place as it was supposed to. And I would like an explanation of what SANDAG staff has done, all the process you've gone through to try to make this happen for this meeting, and it did not happen.
Sure. So as if you're unaware, when we do have a vacancy for a ITALK position, we have to go through a process. And so we have a nominating committee, and then we also have a selection committee. So the selection committee consists of appointed mayors, and then we need a quorum of 4 or more. So we originally reached out to the selection committee of February of this year to schedule a meeting prior to today's meeting. Our original meeting was scheduled on May 10th. However, we lost quorum 2 weeks prior to that meeting. We attempted to reschedule in May. However, we were unable to establish a quorum for any May meeting. Staff then scheduled a meeting in early June and also was unable to establish a quorum. Staff then met with legal counsel to see if any other alternatives were available. However, the ordinance is clear on who is required to attend that meeting, and that must be in person. Staff then reached out to the selection committee to schedule a meeting prior to the transportation committee meeting on June 21st at 8:30 a.m. As of today, we do have a quorum. So we are currently scheduled to have a selection committee on that day. And we have stressed to the selection committee that by not meeting, we are putting ITALK meetings at risk and all the important work that you do. So we are reaching out to them probably weekly now to make sure that they will be at that meeting. But that does serve as a background for your proposed ITALK ordinance amendment.
And how many members on the selection committee? How many
Total?
mayors basically total on the selection committee?
So there is the mayor of City of San Diego and one mayor of each subregions of the 4 subregions. So total of 5 mayors
5 mayors.
and 2, go ahead. Yeah. And then the 2 supervisors, county supervisors.
So
total
7?
of 7, right?
7 members. And are there alternates for these members if they can attend to send someone else in?
There are
their
no
place?
alternates. It has to be
Okay.
the mayors and the supervisors.
Okay. So this body, this committee realizes that the impact they have on ITALK being able to do its job, which is basically overseeing the TransNet expenditures. Do they realize that they're impacting our ability to do our job?
Yes, they are aware.
Okay, and they still don't make the commitment to be there to make the selection at this point. I want to remind everyone that ITALK is putting forward an amendment to correct this situation. This is not the first time this has happened, is that correct?
Correct.
So staff tries as hard as they can to get reappointments set up. First of all, it's very hard to find members that are willing to serve. And once we do, I've been through this myself. My appointment schedule was rescheduled once or twice. So I think every member here has gone through that. So we really need to fix this issue. It is impacting our ability to do our work. And, I think the selection committee needs to be aware of it. There needs to be maybe alternates set up for them. So the amendment that we have proposed will take care of all of this. So hopefully when we get in front of the board and we request approval of this amendment, they realize that this is actually helping all of us do a better job and be able to meet our commitments to the ordinance. So thank you. Okay, we are going to go to the consent agenda and get approval. We have 3 items on the agenda under consent. One is approval of the meeting minutes, annual selection process for ITALK chair and vice chair, and we have the Regional Transportation Improvement Program amendment. First of all, are there any public comments on the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The original draw, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. So, yeah, that's really unfortunate that you guys are having such trouble being able to, have your appointments come forward because of other people who aren't doing their part. And so hopefully this amendment will fix the problem and it won't continue because, it shouldn't be that people aren't showing up to make these selections and doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, Todd Glory never shows up to anything anyway, so it's not surprising that he wouldn't show up to something like this. And, like in that, they're not really understanding how it's affecting your ability to do things, or maybe they do, and that's why they're doing, who knows? But then as far as the minutes go and talking about the TransNet dollars and, how there's, been deficits in the state and the cities and the county that we have to face. It's kind of, disheartening to think about the fact that the TransNet dollars were supposed to be going to fix the roads. And now they are being used for so many other things like bike lanes or sidewalks and different things that the roads actually suffer. And seeing that now that more money gets taken away from it, just there's no end in sight to seeing where the roads are going to be fixed. I feel like we get so far behind ourselves in being able to keep up with all of this maintenance and things that need to be kept up with that, what does the future look like right now with such peril kind of happening across the nation and just with the money that, people need, we need to be able to do all of the projects. So, I feel like if they weren't being spent on things that they weren't intended to be used for, that it wouldn't be such a significant problem when there's a decrease in them. So I don't know, it's like a perpetual state of nothing getting done.
Very
That
well.
concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Do any of the members of ITALK have questions or comments about the consent agenda? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the consent?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent, Rivera.
Very good.
Second.
Second, very good. Can we take a vote?
Thank you. Thank you. For biology environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Approved. For CEO private sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Contractor construction is absent. For finance budgeting, Miriam Bavaki.
Yes.
For licensed civil traffic engineer, Frank Rivera.
Yes.
And licensed engineer and real estate right-of-way acquisition are absent. That motion does pass unanimously with those members present.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to the reports. The next item number 5, is the TransNet Triennial Performance Audit. This is our final report, and we will be voting to accept this if everything goes well. I do have Kathy Brady, I believe, from Schoberg Evencheck Consulting that will give us the final report presentation. Kathy, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear
I
me?
see you. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, Chair House and members of the ITALK. I'm happy to join you today and present the final report for the fiscal year 2024 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit. Today's presentation should move relatively quickly. There has not been many major changes to the draft report since we presented it to you back March 13th. But since that was a couple months ago, I thought I would provide a quick refresher of the audit scope, results, and recommendations, as well as share feedback from the presentation of the draft report that we did to the Transportation Committee on March 15th. Next slide, please. As you might recall, we were asked to focus on the 8 areas shown on this slide. They included looking at project delivery to date against the ordinance scope and boundaries, what remains to be done as planned in the 2021 regional plan, how those plans are affected by the 5 big moves and the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, especially in light of funding shortage. Other task areas look at smart growth grants, ITALK practices, and status of prior audit recommendations. Next slide. If you remember, we found several repeat findings, and more than 40% of the prior audit recommendations remained outstanding from the last 3 audit cycles. For instance, we still could not validate which project scopes and boundaries were completed or planned for completion against the specifics that were in the ordinance. And there were still no formal plans to address the funding gaps, although there had been progress made with bringing in additional revenues. SANDAG does track the status of prior audit recommendations regularly. There's assigned owners and estimated completion dates, but it seemed that at times SANDAG did not always understand the intent behind some of the recommendations, as certain implemented actions weren't always quite on point with the recommended action. In another area we audited, smart growth grants, we found activities aligned with the smart growth concepts and program goals, and outcomes were not yet being measured, but that's in progress as well. Next slide, please. So those findings led to about 22 recommendations, mostly centered around enhancing accountability with the ordinance through better linkages of what was being done and what's planned to be done, and communicating those linkages. Recommendations focused on having executive sponsorship to prioritize and assign ownership for resolving prior recommendations, including being precise on which ordinance project scopes and boundaries have been completed, what is planned to be completed, and what will not be done. Other recommendations included implementing formal methodologies to reprioritize ordinance projects given funding shortages, as well as enhancing smart growth monitoring, among other recommendations. When we presented to the Transportation Committee, they had no changes to the recommendations. So they are as is, as they were in the draft report. And a summary list of all recommendations can be found starting on page 4 of the audit report. Next slide. In terms of the presentation to the Transportation Committee, it overall went really well. It was framed by an analogy from Chair Frankel to put the audit results in perspective. It related to newlyweds whose parents helped with the down payment to buy a home that came with a set of conditions, like where it should be and what kind of house. And then he talked about competing conditions by the mortgage financiers to pay the balance of the home price. It was an eloquently verbalized analogy that I cannot recreate here for you today. By attempting to do so would be a disservice, but you can find it about the 1 hour, 21-minute mark at the March 15th Transportation Committee recording. In terms of the audit report presentation, like I said, it went well. Many of the Transportation Committee members expressed gratitude to ITALK for the outstanding volunteer work that you do. Many were appreciative of the time you spent on the taxpayers' behalf. There were some questions for SANDAG related to the implementation plan, as well as some members just wanting to verify that SANDAG agreed to all the audit recommendations, and which they did. And a couple questions related to whether planned TransNet lockbox projects were done, which they were. There was one small item that MTS wanted us to fact check, which we talked with them after the meeting, and our data was correct in the report. Nearly all of the members that spoke echoed the importance of the transparency and communication from SANDAG, not just for the public, but for the committee and board members as well. So since we presented that draft report to the Transportation Committee and to the ITALK in March, we've changed very little in the report, maybe a typo here and there. The biggest change, if you could even call it that, was clarification in the executive summary. The way we had worded something, it was not clear that SANDAG reported progress that approximately 1/3 of the ordinance projects were completed, not that ordinance projects were only 1/3 complete. So we just changed that wording to be more precise. Other than that, the report is the same as the draft report that you saw in March. Next slide, please. So this slide shows where we are in the audit report process. We're at that 4th step, presenting the final audit report to you here today. My understanding is that Chair Frankel, if all works out, will provide the final report to the SANDAG board at their June 21st meeting. Before I conclude today's brief presentation, really on behalf of all of us on the audit team, I want to thank the ITALK again for the opportunity to conduct the performance audit on your behalf, and to the ITALK audit subcommittee, who take a lot of time to give us their input and perspective throughout the audit. We'd also like to thank SANDAG staff and each of the TransNet partner agencies. Everyone is very cooperative and professional throughout the audit, trying to get us the information we need to review. A final thank you to you, the full ITALK committee that's here today, for your time. And with that, I conclude my presentation and turn it back to Chair House.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Let's open it up for public comments. Are there any public comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The original draw, you can go ahead.
Yes, so when I was speaking before, it was 69% increase over 5 years. I couldn't remember exactly. So yeah, transparency, SANDAG's transparency to the public and the boards and communication is extremely important. And, you know, it seems that there is a lack of that across the board. And it's unfortunate because that's where a lot of issues come in and things fall short. And it keeps people from really understanding, you know, what's going on across the board. And I think that, you know, when you guys are having to make decisions on certain things, and if you don't have, you know, transparency or, I mean, because you're, you know, I would hope that you're trying to make things better and you're trying to improve upon things and audit things so that, you know, or work on things so that it doesn't, there aren't continual problems. But if nobody has information on that and there isn't transparency, then you're not able to do your job and make sure that the money is being spent where it should be, and you know, being able to do that. And I'm finding that, you know, just seeing that SANDAG isn't, you know, and it's more the board, the higher up, the upper management, is tending to hide things, not only from the public, but from the board members, from the committee members. And it's doing a disservice to you guys, but it's also doing a disservice to the public. And that's why I bring up Andre, is because he's been a very good one in that to hide things. And he's continuing to do so, and he still has his job. And so when we have people that are engaged in that are still on the staff and dealing with billions of dollars, you know, it's just, it's sad, because then you guys don't, you know, get the full information on what's going on. And you may even find out later after these people are gone, which is unfortunate, because you deserve to know immediately.
Thank you. So are there any comments from ITALK members?
Yes, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Frank.
I think in reading the report, I like the way the report was presented. And I think part of what happens is that there's so many people involved in each of the projects. And then SANDAG's trying to herd cats, trying to get all the information from everybody. So I guess it's just too much information trying to be funneled by too many people. And then someone finally saying, this is what the status of the project is. My suggestion is that in the RTIP, up in the header, we do have a space in the gray shaded area, and it'd be easy to add on the last column on the right at the bottom where that particular project is funded to. So it may be funded through to PE, or funded through right-of-way, or funded through construction. And then you know what the milestone is of that particular project. And that's a very easy way to track where all the projects are at. It gets difficult because I know in my previous work, we also would get funding only up through the environmental phase or through design phase. And that's not listed in the RTIP. So I think what happens is we start getting into an apples and oranges, thinking, okay, I'm going through environmental and the RTIP doesn't have environmental on there. So I think a better definition of how the scopes on the projects are needed is something that we need to look at. When we do a major project, there's usually like a project initiation document, and that kind of lists the goals and objectives of the projects and how the funding's going to work and whether enough funding has been identified. And so I think that we need to kind of start looking at that. The project managers need to kind of better track that project status and give that information to SANDAG. And maybe it's a template that each RTIP project has that is submitted by the project manager to SANDAG, and SANDAG almost has it as a checkbox to have, I guess, the confusion minimized. So I think that once you take a look at all of that, then you get a better dashboard of where we're at with all the projects and less chance for confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
May I?
Yes, I was going to ask for a response. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Are you referring to local agency projects, SANDAG projects, all projects?
I think what it comes down to is the report's really looking at the TransNet projects, TransNet funded projects. And so I think that's what our role is, to make sure that the TransNet funded projects are being done the way they're supposed to and complying with the original scope of the project. It's very easy to get scope creep when you're a project manager saying, well, now that I'm here, let me take care of this other issue that's come up. But that wasn't in the original scope and the original budget, and then it leads to delays. And so it's just project control measures.
So we do have, in our CIPs here at SANDAG, we do have the different milestones listed and their dates. And then we also bring a report to ITALK quarterly on where the projects are, what the dates are, what phase they're in. But what I hear is that you kind of want that more at the ordinance level and not at the project level, or?
I guess it's neither. I want it easier for the auditor to be able to say this project is on track or this one is not.
Yeah.
So
we are
whatever
currently
format
working on
that is.
Yeah. So I think the disconnect is that we do that at the capital improvement program or project level. We have not been doing it at the ordinance level. So trying to get
Make
all that information up into a higher level is what we're currently working on going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, let's see how that effort goes, and hopefully the next audit will be a lot easier. Kathy, I want to thank you and your team to really going above and beyond to get this audit done. I know this was a lot more complicated than you had originally intended or anticipated. But you all did a very excellent job. So we really appreciate you working with the subcommittee and with all of SANDAG staff to make sure that we really have some good, solid recommendations going forward. So thank you. I do have a question for staff. The subcommittee really painstakingly went through a lot of discussions with SANDAG staff and leadership to make sure that the results of these audits are going to be implemented, the recommendations were going to be implemented. And that all happened during an interim leadership process. Now we have a new leader on board. So we would like to maybe have a dialogue with the new executive director, the incoming executive director at some point to learn more about what his ideas are about implementation. Are we going to maintain the course as was committed, or are there other ideas? So perhaps maybe in a future ITALK meeting, once everything is settled down, and maybe we can have some dialogue with the director at that point.
Sure, we'd be happy to facilitate that. And to take this one step further, there is collaboration happening now within the Office of the Independent Auditor to put together some sort of dashboard or indicator of all the corrective action plans, including the one that has that has been presented for you today so that we can have a holistic view of where we are with the various audits and have the actions been completed and then verified by the Office of the Independent Auditor as well.
Very good. Thank you so much for the update, and we look forward to getting reports on that. So,
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
also, just to, on top of that, the FY25 budget did have a budget for an additional staff
correct.
to come on board and just focus strictly on TransNet and the performance audit. So that is still moving forward.
Good. Thanks for that update as well. I wanted to see if that was still moving forward or not. Thank you. Okay, so this is we need to vote to accept this item. And I believe the report to the board is going to happen in July.
Correct. It got moved to July.
That's correct. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the TransNet triennial report.
Okay.
Are we
Or
approving?
to
or
accept.
To
To
accept.
accept.
Yeah.
To accept.
Yeah. I second that.
Very good. Let's take a vote.
Thank you. For biology environmental, Lorraine Alquist.
Accept.
For CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Accept.
For finance and budgeting, Miriam Babaki.
Yes.
And for licensed civil traffic engineer, Frank Rivera.
Yes.
Contractor construction, licensed engineer, and real estate right-of-way acquisition are absent. So that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 6, which is the proposed program budget amendment for the Bike Early Action Program. And it looks like we have Chris. Hi, Chris Kluth.
Good morning. I talk. Back.
Good morning.
Okay. It's going to be a joint presentation with Michelle. Oh, here she comes.
Okay.
Just going to switch roles. So really the main point of our presentation today is to give you kind of a condensed version of our quarterly update, but then also that will lead into really the main point of the item is the proposed program budget amendment, which Michelle will go over when we get to that point. Okay, so a lot of you have seen and heard the basics of where we are and what the point of the early action program is. But to quickly recap, it was the initial $200 million investment from TransNet investment from our board of directors that came out of the dedicated 2% from the TransNet ordinance that goes to active transportation to build the highest priority and bikeways in the region. So that was about 70 miles worth of projects. We have 63, a little more underway. It's a mix of class 1 bikeways, which are pedestrian and mixed use path with bikes, urban bikeways in primarily the most urbanized and highest density parts of the region. And then while we're doing that, we want to make sure we're connecting to other local bikeways and other regional investments, particularly regional transit. So we kind of put together this new map. It's, I think, a little bit still in development, but to show you the entire regional network and how the projects that we're focused on and talking about today fit in. You know, looking at things at the regional level is always a bit of a challenge. So we're still working on that for future presentations, but you can see looking at the legend, the projects down there, and mostly in San Diego, but then also up in Vista, and then down at the border at Bayshore project, currently in construction. So quick recap of our completed projects and some results, befores and after counts from our Georgia Meadland. It's a couple of bike boulevards up in North Park and Mid-City. Lots of traffic calming in these projects. And so in neighborhood traffic circles, buffered bike lanes, pop outs, bulb outs. And the main post-project data shows that bike ridership increased 20%, which is great. Pedestrian travel was up 24%, because this is kind of a cut-through route before. Some of the features discourage high-speed cut-through traffic, so we did see a decrease of 24% in volume of vehicles, and then also just as important, a reduction of 20% of motor vehicle speeds. So that kind of pattern is consistent across the projects that we've looked at so far. And I'm sure over time we'll continue to come back and present data on post-project results. Moving up to North County, this is over a 4-year period. This kind of shows as we continue to develop the Inland Rail Trail, the more pieces we add and complete, the more people that are using it, which kind of goes back to one of our other main focuses, is the importance of an actually connected network and not giving up at the tough spots. So over, I think there's 2 or 3 projects that were completed during this time frame. A bike ridership increased by 5 times and pedestrian travel doubled. Couple shots. Oops, that was my favorite shot. I went right past it. But in the interest of time, we'll keep running. And another really big project that had connected 2 major destinations, Mission Bay, and then the further Rose Creek Trail or Rose Canyon Trail up to UCSD and beyond. This included 2 grade-separated crossings under Mission Bay Drive and then under I-5, so you don't have to deal with any crazy intersections there. We've seen bike ridership increase 14% and then pedestrian travel up 45%, which is good. I didn't expect that kind of increase, but that's great. And then motor vehicle speed or travel was down 18% through there. Another shot of that with the bridge. Turned out really nice. Okay, on to our bike program status, current status. So we have 23 miles complete, and it's I think 11 or 12 projects. We added a new column here, done by local, which is great by us. If someone else wants to, I know Chula Vista has done some pieces. The city of San Diego has completed some segments on the regional bikeway. And then there's at least 1 or 2 that have been done by large private development where they've built the project that's adjacent to their project. So 5.8 miles of those where we didn't have to spend any TransNet money, but we're still, increasing the connectivity and kind of leveraging in another way the investments from this TransNet program. So 16 miles that are currently in construction, and then another 16.8 miles that are those in final design. Those are designed and they're ready to go out. We're phasing those. We'll see those projects in a couple slides here. So the projects that are in construction, Pershing Bikeway, 95% plus complete. We expect that to be fully open and operational, I'll say in the summer, but not late summer, earlier part of the summer. So we're very excited about that. Bayshore Bikeway, Barrio Logan, 73% complete. And can't remember if we reported this before, but important to note that pretty much starting now through November, this project will be on pause. We have conflicts at the north with the City of San Diego Trunk Line Sewer Project. That project has experienced significant delays. They're right in the same footprint. So we're going to have to wait for the city to be done with that project to complete Barrio Logan segment of Bayshore Bikeway from Beardsley up to Park Boulevard. And then also at the southern end, we are having more detailed discussions with the Navy at 32nd Street and how we can integrate some improvements down there to make sure that we're ensuring the most efficient access to the naval base. So that is also causing us to go on pause. So we worked all of that out. We've communicated with the community and the stakeholders. It's unfortunate, but those are two issues that were out of our control, but we're moving forward with a plan and we'll come back. I want to emphasize that we're coming back. The project is not abandoned. We still have additional funding and scope, and we have our contractor still on board. They'll be taking a break, but they will be back in the fall to complete the project. Let's see, Border Bayshore, big project at the borders, 40% complete. That's moving on without any significant delays. And the Imperial Avenue Bikeway is kind of in pre-con activity. We've got our traffic control permit, and there is a groundbreaking later this month. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then also Inland Rail Trail up in Vista, that mile-long project is just starting some pre-construction activity. And so there'll be a groundbreaking for that project as well. And then in the bid phase, as we speak, Uptown Bikeways, Eastern Hillcrest, big project, joint project with the City of San Diego. We are going to integrate the construction of the Normal Street Promenade into our project, and they are paying for all of theirs. So just to be clear on that as well. So that's out to bid, and I think, I don't see anyone from contracts there. So that should be coming back to the board in July, hopefully, with some good bids. And then here's projects going into construction over the next 12 to 16 or 18 months. These are all fully designed, except for Robinson. Sorry, Robinson is not fully designed yet, but the other projects are fully designed and ready to go. So budget amendments, why? Okay, cost increases. So here's a quick rundown of the main reasons that we have seen cost increases, not just in our projects, but across the board. And I'll have a couple examples of that, or a summary of that in a second. So in typical inflation and increase in construction costs, I think the Caltrans Construction Cost Index showed a 27% increase. There's a slide illustrating that in a sec. And then as the projects have gone through design and actually into construction, the longer things take, the more new rules and regulations there are. So we've had to accommodate new and updated regulatory requirements for projects in design and construction. So, and we have also experienced some delays acquiring project approvals and permits, which the longer it takes, the longer you push it out, the more the costs go up. And then for projects in construction, we had 2 winters of significant rain, and that caused a fair bit of challenges and issues as these a couple of our projects were still in construction. And then let's see, typical unforeseen conditions of utility conflicts, especially in projects that are in, the older parts of the city. Utilities are not always where they are or even marked at all in the as-built plans if they're really old. And then also we have run into a fair amount of unsuitable soils, lots of clay, and that material needs to be hauled away and then filled, and it's just that kind of cascades into a lot of extra cost that you can't really tell. We've done what we can to accommodate that in future projects, additional potholing, and just knowing that it's going to happen, so we're not surprised in construction at the level of or the amount of unsuitable soils that we may come across. So there's a nice graph showing the construction cost index, sorry. To give you an idea, it's, this is across the state, probably across the country, that we've seen similar increases in construction costs. And so we were curious and to see, okay, how do our project costs compare to other similar projects? And so we did an informal survey. I think we had like 16 to 18 projects, maybe a little more, up to 20 projects in California, and then a few in Washington State, where we looked at class 4, kind of your basic class 4 bikeway with mostly paint and bollards, some minor improvements. Our costs for that type of project, $6.7 million a mile. Other agencies, similar project was 5.8. And we also looked at some of the bigger projects, more complex projects, where we end up like regrading, doing bulb outs, pop outs, other more heavy civil improvements. Drainage is a big one. And then, we end up doing signal and lighting improvements as well. Our projects that are an example of that are like Pershing and Bayshore Bikeway, Bar Logan. So our average cost per mile on that is $13 million per mile, and other agencies showed an average cost of 16.6. So we're in the ballpark. We're all paying lots of money for projects, and it's not just bike projects. So that concludes my portion, and we're heading into the budget amendment section, and Michelle will take over.
Sure. Thanks, Chris.
Thank
So as stated in the report and included in attachments 5 through 7, we are proposing to process a budget amendment for 8 different CIPs, which will either complete or begin construction within the next 6 months. For these 8 CIPs, the total existing budget that is funded is $183.1 million. After reviewing current construction costs and escalation, we are estimating that these projects will now cost $197.9 million, which leaves us with a $14.8 million funding gap. Since there is not sufficient TransNet bike, pedestrian, or neighborhood safety, or BPNS funding to cover this gap, staff is currently proposing to utilize our commercial paper program, which is basically borrowing against future BPNS funds in order to fund these projects in the near term. So if you're unfamiliar, the TransNet BPNS funding is funded through an off the top. So when the net revenues come in, we take 2% off the top, and that currently goes towards the bike program. And that averages roughly about $8 million a year. So as Chris has stated, these projects have become very expensive. And so that $8 million is not able to fund these projects, since we have, as you can see, about 8 projects going out to construction or currently in construction in the next 6 months. So we are asking the ability to borrow up to $16 million, and this will include contingency or some unknown costs that we may come across. So it's an additional $1.2 million on top of the known need at this time. And attachment 6 provides a summary of the projects and their proposed budgets. And attachment 7 provides the red lines to the CIPs to show what costs are changing, what proposed revenues there are, and a proposed milestone for those projects. We also have Don Batiste, our finance director, here to answer any questions that you have on commercial paper. And with that, our recommendation is that the ITALC is asked to recommend that the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors approve the borrowing of commercial paper up to $16 million for 8 projects in the Bike Early Action Program to support the near-term budget needs for these projects funded with TransNet, bicycle, pedestrian, and neighborhood safety funds. And 2, approve the corresponding FY 2025 program budget amendment. And we're here for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have one public comment. The original draw, you can go ahead.
So yeah, it's crazy how much, see, this TransNet comes from people driving cars, and we don't even have our roads in good enough condition to drive down them, but we're paying for people to have really nice bike lanes and all of these bike projects to come forward. And then you're even going to borrow money that should be going towards the roads and putting it towards this, then we'll have to pay interest on, I'm sure. And I mean, I don't like, it's kind of like the whole vehicle miles traveled thing. I mean, maybe, you know, there needs to be some kind of fee that the bikers pay so that they can fund their own infrastructure. Because right now, people that don't ride bikes are funding that infrastructure, all while their belief was that it was going to be that they were going to have better roads and that we're not going to have to like, but so it's just not equitable. It's not fair to those who are driving because it's basically taking away from what needs to be done on the roads that they're driving down, and we're the ones paying for it. So I just don't understand how there hasn't been some kind of like fee to use those lanes, maybe like a toll lane, right? You want to toll us for using the roads that we've already paid for. So, you know, wouldn't it be equitable to then charge these bikers to use the roads that they use, to use the lanes that they use? If they want more, then they can pay more. But it's like, we shouldn't be having the drivers who, you know, spend a lot of money on gas to have it not go towards something that they can actually use. And then have the people that are benefiting from the money that these people, you know, so it's like, where would the funds come from if the people weren't driving? So it doesn't really make sense. And it's not equitable. And everybody wants to push equity. So I feel like you need to think about something where the bikers are going to pay for the roads that they want and use.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the members of ITALC? Yes, go ahead, Lorraine.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Michelle. I appreciated the detail of the presentation. Just to go into kind of breaking down where the costs are coming from a preliminary level, is it been determined where the overruns are coming from? Particular in what segment? From a preliminary design, almost feasibility to the PAED, to PE, to construction, et cetera. Where is the bulk of that kind of coordination or that increase in cost coming from? Maybe you could, I'd like to hear a little bit more detail on if you've broken it down to that level.
Yeah, the bulk of the increases are from construction. Higher bids, materials. There are a couple of different categories of materials. Asphalt was a huge one. Signals, anything with metal in them, like electrical signals, poles. The raw material costs for those just skyrocketed during COVID and after, and they haven't really come down. And then, you know, projects in construction, you know, kind of highlighted or touched on a couple of points where we have construction change orders due to unforeseen conditions. Those can be pretty expensive as well. So that's as far as the amount and the dollars go. Construction is where we see the biggest increases, and of course the biggest dollar amounts. There are some minor minor increases for additional design where, you know, as I also mentioned, we have to address new regulatory, you know, stormwater and ADA are two big ones, you know, things that we're, you know, happy to do because we have to do them and we should be doing them. But, you know, when that comes up kind of when you're most of the way through design and you have to redesign, that costs money and that costs time and then that pushes the timeline out. And thus, again, increasing your kind of year of expenditure, time of expenditure. So in summary, that's kind of how it's breaking down.
So with the process of the amendment or the request for additional budget, has there been any safety nets put in place that account for what this forecast and change is going to be beyond what it is in current day?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've been a lot more strict about looking at year of expenditure. We now have more projects to look back on to see how costs change, and looking at our bids. So we've also broken down our invitation for bid process and how we ask bidders to either group or break down certain elements of the projects. For a while, we had a philosophy that certain parts of projects were better to be grouped together. And we saw that some of those, the bids were coming in way, way higher than our engineers' estimate. So we've gone to breaking those out into, you know, very detailed line items. And so that gives us a little better idea of a more accurate cost, but then that also, I think we're also seeing a little more sharpened pencils from the bidders on those items as well. Let's see, what else have we done? So yeah, we've looked ahead, year of expenditure. And yeah, I think it's kind of a summary of our lessons learned and being more realistic about what to expect. So our last bid, actually, it's in here. Or the Inland Rail Trail project was actually under, so that we have to amend that project to take money off of it. So I think we're getting better, but getting better is reflecting higher costs because that's what the market is.
And I think this is my third and final question. In regards to the costs associated with the utilities and with the soils, I know some of that work can be done at the environmental scale that may inform. It's an additional cost that is then heeded during the PAD. And if that allocation or that budget doesn't account for that additional work, it becomes problematic. But just as a suggestive point, you know, maybe switching and having that information collected earlier on in the process can then minimize that impact later on than, you know, adjusting how the project is going to move forward.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Any other comments? Yes, Maria.
I totally sympathize with with this construction costs going up. It's just been unbelievable that the rise. So I can totally see how the last 2 years and with increase in construction that impacts budgets that may have been prepared several years ago. So that's my question has to do with actually what do we do from an overall budget standpoint? Like, if this $16 million was included in the contingency or not, or if it didn't, how does it impact the overall budget of the CIP budget? It has to come from somewhere. Well, how does it get rebalanced, and how do you all look at and probably something to be expected this year for a lot of projects that are going to go to construction because their budgets were prepared several years ago and these kind of costs were not anticipated. So, you know, this $16 million may be a small amount in the $1.3 billion SANDAG budget, but it's as these projects come and they get bid and there's construction and there's increased costs, where does all this increase that maybe beyond their contingencies will be coming from? And have you thought about that? Just a bigger picture question.
Yeah, so the good thing about using the commercial paper is that we will only access it if needed. So we are thinking that the projects will become a lot more expensive with the $14 million gap. It is coming from future BPNS funding. So our bike program is kind of coming not to a close, but the majority of the projects are now going into construction. After this big lump of projects, we don't have as many going into construction going forward. So it will balance out. We will be taking future revenues to pay back the commercial paper that we do draw. And it is only coming from the BPNS program. There's no other funding this could be spent on, or no other projects this funding could be spent on. So we do look at these projects on an annual basis, and we kind of reassess where they're at. We have put in an additional contingency, and we also have included a higher escalation, that's the word I want, not rate, but I guess it's rate. Yeah, escalation rate based on Chris's comments that what we've seen in the past, they've been increasingly higher. So we are confident that this will cover the costs. However, if costs continue to increase, that is something that we would need to look at as a program level to see how we can address those costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Frank?
I've got comments. Yes, Chris, on your page 127, attachment 3, this is project listed as number 15, the Bayshore Bikeway 8B, Main Street to Palomar. On the comments, from what I recall when I was working on the project, was that it's not for City of Chula Vista to condition upon redevelopment. South of Palomar Street is City of San Diego, and so that should reflect that it's the City of San Diego. It's the project at the south end of that limits. There's no more Chula Vista right-of-way on that project.
Okay.
And then with regards to this report, the reasons that I agree with the recommendation is, as Chris mentioned, the construction cost index is really something that we can't control. And it's been something that's very difficult to sort of stay ahead of that. And the changing regulations always makes you take a step backwards when you're in the design. And the fact that there's many, I guess, unmapped or accurately recorded underground utilities with fiber optic now going more and more in place, we're going to see more of it and more conflicts that the projects are going to have when we have to relocate them or deal with them. And those delays with utility companies, we can never get guaranteed work windows. And so it just makes things very difficult. In Chula Vista, we did propose and get a bond measure approved that helped us get very low interest rates because it happened about the time of COVID, that we were able to leverage our maintenance projects and get those out on the street as quickly as possible. Because even though we knew that we had those programmed for the next 5 to 10 years, the cost of those was only going to increase. And so we went and got the funds up front to be able to put those projects out on the street. And people were looking for work at that time. And so we got very good bids. So I think the sooner we're able to fund these 8 projects and get them out on the street, the less they're going to cost. Once these improvements are completed, they will help leverage other improvement projects within that vicinity, because it always helps once you show that an area has been transformed for the area. So I think that in light of all of that, that the sooner these projects are out into construction and completed, the better that it'll be, and it'll reflect back that this was the cheapest way to do it. Thank you. Those are all my comments.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, I have a couple of questions also. First of all, for clarification and make sure everyone, members of the public, understand that TransNet is a sales tax measure, correct?
Correct.
Everyone in the county of San Diego spends any dollar, half cent of that dollar goes towards improving transportation, including bike lanes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not a road user fee, it's not a gas tax, it's an actual sales tax. Also, that the bike program is mandated in the TransNet. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's funds dedicated to bike lane that cannot be spent anywhere else. Is that correct?
The 2% off the top is only for the BPNS
Correct.
projects.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody is on the same page. All right. The Barrio Logan project and the delay in construction. Is there a cost associated with that delay with the contractor?
Yes, of course.
So how is that negotiated, or what is the cost impact?
Well, we all told, we're estimating, you know, we should probably have the project manager here to answer that question most accurately. But ballpark, it's probably, I think our estimate overall is about $4 million.
Wow, that's a
impact.
huge cost.
We can, if I'm totally wrong on that, but I think
Could
that's,
you get back to us, Chris, just
we
to
will
make sure?
absolutely make sure we get you the correct
Okay.
figure on that.
How did we get there? Why is it that all of a sudden in the middle of construction, is that something that wasn't found in design, during design or planning?
Well, the city trunk line sewer project was supposed to have been completed before our project began.
Mhm.
So the city had some difficulties with their initial bids, and so they had to go back out to bid on the
Mhm.
project. And, you know, we're an example of all of us kind of being in the same boat. Their contract, once they did get underway, their contractor ran into some unforeseen challenges. As they're doing work down there on the bayfront. And, you know, again, they started construction, not started, but they had a big part of their construction during the big winter rains. One thing leads to another. So that project got started late, and then they have also, you know, experienced delays during their project. So that is pushing our project. Well, it's basically pushing it up, causing us to have to stop work in that area. And we continue to try and work with them to see if we can build parts of it where they're not or where they're finished. So we're not giving up on it, but more or less, I think, you know, I think we've been discussing this with them for over a year to try and find ways to minimize the impact to our project. But at the end of the day, we need to put that on pause. The southern end of the project, you know, the Navy had some additional questions on the phasing of all of the construction, different projects, even other than this one, and how to minimize the construction window to minimize the impact to their access to the base. As you know, you've got to be able to get to the base when you need to get there. So I think, you know, they had some additional ideas that weren't fully vetted during the initial design.
Mm.
And that was, also, again, to sum it up, kind of a change in direction and additional work that we needed to do to accommodate everybody's needs at that intersection, which is highly impacted by all kinds of.
So
different
Chris, I just
stakeholders.
don't understand why the project even went to bid if the sewer project wasn't even completed. How did that happen?
We do have grant funding on this project, which
Mm.
we were out of extensions.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went out to bid initially,
Mhm.
that sewer project was still supposed to be on a schedule
Mhm.
that would have allowed us to make a slight alteration in our phasing, but still be able to complete our project. But
Mm.
that didn't happen.
Okay.
It had.
So there was a
additional
reason
delays.
why
Yeah.
this whole process is where it is.
Yeah.
Is there a way to amend the project or segment it so at least, you can release the contractor because you don't know when this is is the year even gonna be enough? And does that mean the dollar, keeps growing? Is there a way to just minimize that? Because $4 million for delay, that's a lot of money,
Mm.
especially when you're trying to borrow, 16 million here. So,
Yeah, I think, the 4 million is not just, well, it is a big part of
delay.
it. It is the delay and, demobilizing, remobilizing.
Yes,
All of that.
understand.
So I think right now we're focused on minimizing
Mhm.
impacts and continuing to work with all the stakeholders to stay in touch, coordinate on everything we can.
Mhm.
During the time that the project is paused, our contractor has been very good to work with. So
Mhm.
we, at this point, we have a very a good understanding of what the limits of work are and when they'll be back. We have the scope and a schedule in anticipation of a restart in October or November. And we should be able to start on the southern end, the 32nd Street intersection. There's a fair amount of work down there. So that actually does give us a little more cushion at the north end as far as phasing goes. So we're hoping between those two and our current, good faith communication with all parties, including the city of San Diego on the trunk line sewer project, that the timeline that we have laid out seems feasible to everybody.
Okay, well, we will certainly be interested in regular updates on that
Absolutely.
to make sure that things are progressing. Regarding the commercial paper, I know SANDAG has done this before. You borrow against what future revenues and then you pay it back. And that really helps implementation and delivery to the public, which is what you're supposed to do. And in the long run, if costs are escalated because time passes by delivering early, like Frank said, you could actually maybe either save money or at least break even. My question is though, what efforts have you done or have extended to find other sources of funds, grants, other things? And do you anticipate, because this is a 5-year thing you're looking at trying to finish this. Within this 5 years, would you find more money? What has been that exercise?
Sure. So we do have multiple funding sources on these projects.
Mhm.
One source that funds a lot of these projects is the ATP program, the Active Transportation Program that we get from the state. However, the ATP program does not cover cost overruns. And once you have ATP funds on it, it does not allow for additional ATP funds to be added. So we
Okay.
have gone down that road. We've also gone down federal funding.
Okay.
However, some of these projects were started and we're going through the process and they do not have federal NEPA. So there's federal funding that cannot be used on some of these projects. So some of these projects cannot take federal funding. For those that can, we have already added federal funding onto those projects. For example, Barrio Logan, I believe, has 8 or 9 different funding sources on it. So we have looked out to all the different relevant funding sources that we can add on it. And at this point, all those have been looked at and are no longer viable.
So can you confidently say that you have exhausted all resources that you could have gone to before coming to us for approval of a commercial paper?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's all the comments I have. This is
And
a.
Chair, may
Yes,
I
of course. Go
add
ahead.
on to, in regards to when you do receive the grant funding and there's a stipulation or a time frame associated with that, and then as the project goes through and gets delayed, is there further complication, meaning is SANDAG going to have to pay back some of that grant funding that therefore complicates and convolutes the financial implications?
Absolutely. Especially with state funding, we have already exhausted our extensions for some of these projects. So we're only allowed one extension. So the next date will be the end all date. If we do not build those projects by that date, then the funds will have to be returned back to the state.
Good point. Thank you for clarifying that. So hence the urgency of getting this going. Okay. So item 6 is an action item. We need to make recommendations for this particular item 6. Do I have a motion?
I motion to approve.
Very good. We'll have a
I'll
second.
second it. Fine.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Thank you. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist.
Approve.
For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Contractor Construction is absent. For Finance and Budgeting, Miriam Babaki.
Yes.
For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Frank Rivera.
Yes.
And Licensed Engineer and Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition are absent. That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. And one more thing, I just wanted to announce that Chris Kluth will be retiring next month.
Oh my
So this is probably his
God.
last
time.
presentation to you.
This is the last time I see you.
One big ask from you guys.
Well, we gave you what you asked for.
I know. Thank you.
That's your retirement gift.
Yeah, it's always been a pleasure.
Oh,
And I
wow.
mean that. Coming to iTalk, you guys ask good questions and are fair and listen. And we, as staff, we all really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for all your years of service. I know this was kind of put on your plate after others left. So you've done a good job of bringing it back to, you know, somewhat of a completion and doing a great job in getting things going. I'm really pleased with the progress that you're making. You know, we had a kind of a little bit of a stagnant situation there for a while, but things are happening. And I know all those bicycle riders are very happy and grateful to you, even though they don't speak up.
We do actually hear from them
Oh,
quite a
good.
bit.
Good, yes.
And
When you don't get it done.
well, actually, you know, now that we've gotten a pretty good chunk of the projects done,
Yes.
we had a conference here a couple months ago from statewide advocacy group, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. You know, it's kind of maybe a little bit of a two-way grass is greener.
Yeah.
Like, wow, you guys got all this done? And I think you're from City X. Oh, you guys get a lot of stuff done. And everyone has their challenges, but you know, when people come and write it and see it and how the projects have turned out and how they all actually connect or we're getting there,
Yes.
they're really appreciated. So that's really good to hear when people tell you that when you don't ask them to tell you how great they are.
That's great. It was certainly encouraging to see the
Yeah.
increase in numbers, you know, both riders and pedestrians, which was very good.
Yeah.
Quality of life. So, all right. Thank you again for your service. We're
Congratulations,
sorry to
Chris.
see you go. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Okay. We are now at item number 7, State of Commute Annual Report. And nice to see you. Go ahead and get started. Grace?
Good morning, ITALK committee
morning,
members.
Grace.
My name is Grace Mino. I'm Principal Research Analyst here at SANDAG, and I'm here with my colleague, Connor Voss, who's an Associate Data Scientist. And I just first want to thank our project partners, Caltrans, MTS, and NCTD. A lot of the data that is being presented today is their data. I also want to thank our ITALK SOC subcommittee members, who was Les, Miriam, and Pedro, just for all their support. And I just want to note before we jump into the presentation that Connor and I are not the subject matter experts on all of the data that's being presented. However, any questions that you have, we will be happy to document those and get those answers for you if we cannot answer it during the presentation. So I'm pleased to hand it off to Connor.
Thank you very much, Grace. And thank you, ITALK, for taking our item today. This is an update to the annual report. Some of you may be familiar with the state of the commute, others might not. So hopefully we'll be able to cover a little bit of background here today on the state of the commute, its purpose, and kind of some of the progression that it's made throughout the years. We'll also discuss a little bit of the context related to the performance framework recommendations. You heard today about the most recent audit recommendations, and so we'll kind of touch on some of the previous audit recommendations that have made their way into the State of the Commute report. We'll also discuss a little bit about the updates since the last State of the Commute report. This is the second edition, which it has gone digital compared to the PDF reports that we used to do. And so we'll kind of talk about some of the subsequent changes, and then we'll discuss some next steps, some takeaways, and then we'll do a little bit of a live demonstration of the actual State of the Commute report. So a little bit of the background here. We include this in the report itself, but on an annual basis, SANDAG's required to review the system performance evaluation and also produce the State of the Commute report, provide an independent analysis of information included in the report. So basically, we take a look at a set of performance recommendations that have been identified by ITALK and the SANDAG Board of Directors, and we basically summarize those different metrics and statistics and provide an analysis on a system level. And we also look at things, as we mentioned in these bullets here, such as time of day throughput. We also look at travel times and quite a list of different metrics that have made their way into the State of the Commute report, which we'll touch on in a little bit here. This information is used as a tool in the RTIP and its development process. So the State of the Commute, the first one was published in 2005, and there have been since, I believe it is now up to 16 editions of the report. Some of them were kind of shared with 2 years covered in one report. But as I mentioned, the performance measures and indicators that are in the report have been established by ITALK and the SANDAG Board of Directors. There have been 9 reports, 5 info bits, which are kind of abbreviated reports. And then we have 2 dashboards, with this year being the second edition of the dashboard. So as I mentioned, the performance measures that have made their way into the State of the Commute report, they have, many of them have their origins in some of the audit recommendations, specifically in the 2018 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit. And you have a list here just of some of the different chapters and what the number of recommendations that came out of them, and of those, which ones have to do with performance, since the State of the Commute is a performance monitoring report. And so in the subsequent audits, there have been recommendations that we're always making sure we're evaluating to make sure the State of the Commute is doing its job of catching all of the audit recommendations. And so we'll also be reviewing the most recent audit recommendations to make sure that everything related to performance is captured in the State of the Commute. So Grace and I, in the Applied Research Division, we assumed ownership of the State of the Commute report in 2020. And so we have been making the State of the Commute report since then. And so as a part of kind of the greater performance monitoring framework here, we've also had a couple other ongoing efforts, including the State of the Commute report, one of those being the creation of the regional safety dashboard. And so we produced this. This takes a look at traffic collisions in our region. And so we've been able to produce a similar story page that actually uses some different tools, but provides kind of greater levels of analysis of traffic safety in our region. And that was launched actually last year. And then over the past couple of years, we've been working on obtaining big data to analyze some traffic conditions such as congestion and delay on local streets and roads, because those are things that with our existing data sources, we didn't have great access to. And so we've been able to start incorporating that into this report. This year, we plan on launching as a part of our performance framework, a updated version of our passenger counting program. And as a part of that, we're going to be producing a public-facing dashboard monitoring transit ridership. And so this is really exciting because we do get quite a few data requests for this information. And so we're going to be democratizing access to this in a way that our region hasn't seen before. And so that's really exciting. And we'll be providing updates kind of as we get closer and closer to that, which we anticipate launching in this fall. And then lastly here, we're also mentioning that this year and next year, we're going to be working with local jurisdictions on data collection for performance monitoring in local roads, such as traffic volumes on our local streets. Because while we've been able to acquire big data to analyze such topics such as congestion and delay, we also want to make sure that we are getting observed data whenever possible. And so working with our local jurisdictions is a huge part of that. So this is a brief summary of some of the updates that the State of the Commute has had since we've assumed ownership of it in 2020. And so I'm not going to touch on every single one of these in too much detail, but a majority of these I will mention have come as a result of feedback that we've received when presenting to both the ITalk subcommittee and the greater committee. Some of those being in this newest update, improved bridge data collection, an improved bridge data source, allowing for kind of a better, more holistic view of what the conditions are on our bridges in our region, as well as more information. One of the requests that we got was that for some of the metrics that we were looking at, we didn't go all the way back to pre-pandemic 2019 levels, just because with the transition over to the dashboard format, it required a lot of labor to acquire such data. And so we made the effort this year to make sure that we were capturing that feedback that we received from last year. So some next steps for the State of the Commute. I mentioned earlier, we're going to be releasing the transit ridership dashboard. We're still workshopping the name, so don't get too in love with that name. I know everybody's just in love with transit ridership dashboard, but we're going to be working on an update to that, and we'll be launching that this fall. And that's, like I've said, going to be a part of our new passenger counting program, which we are going to be making the transition over to next month. And then we're also going to be working on collecting more bike data through the TransNet Smart Growth Incentive and Active Transportation grants. So a couple of quick takeaways just before we get into the substance of the report. Just some couple of highlights here. Some of the major findings that we had in the report. Average weekday transit ridership from 2022 to 2023 was up 11%. But it is worth noting that that was still below pre-pandemic levels in 2019. And I'll also interrupt myself one more time just to mention that we look at calendar year in the State of the Commute report. So when you hear me say annual or year, that's covering calendar year, just for some clarification there. We noticed that VMT in the region on our regional highways network was basically about the same, decreased slightly by 0.4% from 2022 to 2023. Highway travel times we'll get into in a little bit, but they were higher in 2023 compared to 2022, but still below 2019 levels. And then traffic collisions increased from 2022 to 2023. However, both of those numbers are still preliminary and so are subject to change depending on when CHP finalizes those. And so now, without further ado, it's time for our production team's favorite dance that we're going to do, and we're going to give you all a demonstration of the State of the Commute report. So this is available in our Open Data portal, and I kind of gave the Open Data portal spiel last year, but just a brief summary is that the real kind of reason that we wanted to make this transition over is because there's a ton of really great information that's covered in the State of the Commute report, and really a static report just doesn't do it justice. And so with this migration over to our Open Data portal, we're allowing users to get more bang for their buck while also not trying to overwhelm people with more information than they really want. So this allows people to have more flexibility with how they prefer to consume information, while also letting heavier data users dive further in and also do more things with the data than previously were able to. So kind of quick kind of navigation things here. If you scroll over any of these figures, Here you'll see a little flyout that gives you a breakdown of what the exact numbers here on this chart are. You'll notice a summary table option right in the bottom left-hand corner, where if you click it, it allows people to view what's being covered inside of the figures. So if you're more of a table person compared to a chart person, you can do that. And then for some of the figures, you'll notice this vertical or upside down pyramid here that I call it, and that allows you to filter information that we've pre-selected for users. So if you want to get start to play around with the data, you'll be able to do that. And then one last thing here is the vertical ellipses here, the 3 dots on the top right of each of these figures. That's a link to be able to access the documentation to each one of these data sources. So this data is publicly available, and this is also an opportunity. So if you have any questions about, is this related to highway travel or local road travel, you'd be able to find all of that documentation there to answer any questions that isn't covered here in the summaries for each of these figures. But as I mentioned, just some kind of quick highlights here. VMT is about the same in our region. We saw travel times in our AM and PM peak periods increase from 2022 to 2023. And then our average weekday transit ridership, which we define as boardings, was up 11% from 2022 to 2023, but still under pre-pandemic levels of 2019. And so if you scroll down a little bit more, we break down traffic collisions here by fatal and severe injury. Overall, the number of collisions increased from 2022 to 2023, but we are seeing a slight decrease in 2022 or in 2023 compared to 2022 in both severe injury collisions and fatal collisions. But I will also kind of stress that that is 2022 and 2023 are both still preliminary and are subject to change. So those numbers may change. So getting into this report, I mentioned earlier, there's quite a few different performance measures that we take a look at. Here's a brief summary. We look at highway travel, we look at traffic safety, we look at quite a bit of transit information as well as specialized transportation as a part of this report. We take a look at bike travel, both in terms of bike mileage and bike counts. We take a look at local roads, both volume and speed on local roads, and then we take a look at infrastructure conditions. And so each one of those has different metrics inside of those, but those are the topics that this report covers as part of our performance framework. And then prior to jumping into the rest of those, we also get a little bit into what the region looks like, both from a people and an economic perspective. And so we have these 3 figures here where we talk about the changes in population, employment, and gross regional product. And so what you'll notice here is that while the populations basically kind of had stagnant growth over the past couple of years, you'll notice that both employment and gross regional product have kind of been increasing specifically after the pandemic, but you'll notice that there's been steady increases since then. And so that really kind of is some important information to consider as you start taking in information related to how people are traveling in the region, because as we know, people travel for many different reasons, some of those being commuting to and from work, but we have also noticed that there have been some changes and some things that have prevented us from getting to pre-pandemic levels, such as things like flexible work options and other different needs when it comes to traveling. And since we now have a different kind of work landscape post-pandemic. So getting into the highway travel section here, we have quite a bit of information, and just as we kind of get into this, we tried to annotate what the data sources are in the subheading of each one of these chart titles, just to kind of provide a little bit of clarification here. But this first one here that we'll kind of linger on for a second is the highway and transit travel times maps along major commute corridors. And so these are 12 different corridors. It's a total of 24 different directional routes. And basically this map allows you to take a look at some of the major commute corridors in our region, and it allows you to see what the travel times are along that route on our highways in 2023. It'll also show you a change from last year, and it'll also show you a change from pre-pandemic levels. And as I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, we're seeing that highway travel times have increased steadily since they bottomed out in 2020. However, we're still seeing that they're below pre-pandemic levels. So if we move on a little bit further, we also take a look at volume on our local roads. And so what this map is showing you is it's showing you these Blue and purple bubbles, these bubbles represent some of the most congested locations in our region in 2023. Congestion is defined basically as when speeds drop dramatically from one point along a highway to another. And by taking a look at this map, you're able to see some information about the location of the congestion point, as well as what the volume is in terms of vehicles on an average day in that peak period. And then you're also going to see what that changes from one year and also from pre-pandemic levels. And so generally speaking, from our 40 most congested locations, the kind of takeaway here is that these locations have gotten more congested over the past year. Moving into traffic safety here, as I mentioned, if you have more thoughts or if you want to find out more about traffic safety, we definitely invite you to take a look at our traffic safety dashboard, which you're able to access in the open data portal. But this here is just a general system-wide snapshot of traffic safety in our region. And as I mentioned, preliminary data is showing an increase from 2022 to 2023 in the number of overall collisions. However, this data is also suggesting at the moment that there was a slight decrease in the number of fatal and severe injury collisions. And then the last thing that I'll leave you with is this transit overview here. As I mentioned, our regional transit system has seen a 11% increase in transit travel from 2022 to 2023. However, that still is below the pre-pandemic levels in 2019. And so we're starting to see things starting to continue on to our pre-pandemic levels, but we're still trying to find what that new normal is. The rest of this report covers quite a bit more information, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to any of the other topics that we have here. We also go into some information about bike travel. We get into more information related to transit travel as well, along with some other really cool things and factoids, but I can talk till the cows come home. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and open it up for any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Okay. Is that it? Thank you. Thank you, Connor. Appreciate the report. Great job. Are there any public comments?
Thanks, Chair. There are no hands from the public.
Okay. Members of iTalk, do you have any questions, comments? Mariam, go ahead.
A couple of questions or comments. The one about the charts that show the accident levels and the safety levels, specifically for bike travel, do you all keep track of that?
Sure do. Are you guys able to flip over to the story page one more time? Yeah, go ahead and scroll all the way down. Yeah, go until you see the multicolored bars. Yeah, so we do a little bit further. Yeah, so we've got this figure here where we look at bike travel. Were you asking about bike counts or were you asking about traffic safety?
Accidents.
Accidents, okay. Yeah, so we do track information related to that, and that is something that we make available in the traffic safety dashboard, which is kind of a part of the greater performance monitoring effort. But with the same data that's in the, fantastic, let's do it. Traffic right there. You just scrolled past it. Lower? That's still in, okay. Traffic safety dashboard. Yeah, that one. Yeah, so we made this, so this comes from the same data source that we use for monitoring traffic safety inside of our State of the Commute report. But go ahead and scroll down to the pedestrian bicyclist. So it's going to be the next one. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Yeah, so this one here.
It's loading.
There we go. Yeah, so this one, we do get into some really detailed reporting here. This analysis really is just kind of system-wide, but we also do allow users to get into, find out more details about collisions in this one. In this section, we talk about pedestrians and bicyclists. If you click on that right arrow on the right side of that, yeah. This one gets into incidents specific to bicyclists, or I should say collisions involving bicyclists. And so you're able to see things like the primary collision factor as well as the type of collision there. And so this is something that we do monitor. And so like I said, the data that's powering this visual here is the same one that's powering the data set in the State of the Commute report.
And you also provide that for pedestrian?
Sure do.
Right, yeah.
If you want to click that left arrow right there on that same screen there, perfect. Yep, so this is information related to incidents involving pedestrians. And so the idea here is we want to allow users to see kind of a curated image of what our region looks like, while also letting people who have questions or needs related to specifics to dive further into the data.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful. And, especially when we're talking about Vision Zero and all of that, like what are the contributing causes? And it would be interesting case study since the data is available. So which leads me to the next question. And I'm kind of ask my fellow ITALK members also to kind of just, I was reading the report. There's a lot of amazing, great information in there. Just, but I was also trying to see what we can interpret from this data, what can be gleaned from all this information that's available about the state of the commute. We are doing major investments in transit, but are we seeing a corresponding increase? It didn't immediately seem that way, but that just me gleaning over the information. We are experiencing congestion, and the data supports it, since the pandemic. And even though flexible work is not available, I would expect that would make a bigger impact on the level of congestion that the numbers show, and my own experience shows. So those are the kind of things that just I wonder about, and if there are any thing that the staff has gleaned from just collecting this data and what you have concluded, and what I would just be curious to see what you all have thought about looking at all this data. That's all.
Okay, anyone else? Well, I think a lot of this information is available for public as well. There's a lot of different ways of using the data, interpreting it, and with the fact that it's available and you're tracking, I think it's important to see where the needs are. I'm pleased to see that transit is increasing. I'm curious about opening of the I-5 North Coast Corridor, the HOV, how that will impact. That's probably going to show up next year more. So there's a lot of ways of looking at the data and saying, well, we're making a dent, or no, we need more work in this area or that. And maybe that forms the next program of SANDAG, and the future. So Lorraine, go ahead.
Really detailed presentation and a lot of data. And sometimes I think more data is yet paralysis from a standpoint of understanding what this means from a community and a stakeholder perspective. And so with that, kind of following up on Chris and Michelle's presentation from a bikeway standpoint on funding and resources, is there a mechanism to alert the public as to how they can use this information? You look at regionally, different areas in the East may need different resources, or maybe looking at obviously different data and information. And so is there an approach or some sort of almost like a YouTube video for the community to access and know where this information is, and be able to optimize that with their informed decision-making as SANDAG moves forward with requests for additional funding, when we have to do amendments to shift financing? Having this level of detail and information, I think, is really important. And so that would be my recommendation as to how to condense this down into a more digestible format, depending on regionally where the community is putting that emphasis.
We do have some training videos on our open data portal for our demographics and census and housing information. And then we also created, what was the most recent one that Jeff created? The YouTube. Oh, we had one on the employment centers too. And we thank you for your idea, and we can create a YouTube video tutorial for the state of the commute as well.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I would like to thank the subcommittee members for your engagement, Les and Mariam, and thank you for your great presentation today. We do have an action to approve this State of the Commute Annual Report. So I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve.
Mariam moved,
I'll second it, Frank. Rivera.
Frank seconded. So let's take a vote.
Thank you. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Approve. For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Contractor Construction is absent. For Finance Budgeting, Mariam Babaki.
Yes.
For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Frank Rivera.
Yes.
Licensed Engineer and Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition are absent. That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, appointment of subcommittee members for FY24 fiscal and compliance audit. At the end of this item, we are looking for volunteers who would like to serve on the committee. And I have Noel to report. Hi, Noel. Welcome.
Good morning, members of the ITALK and Chair House. My name is Noel Takahashi from the SANDAG Finance Department. I'm here to present the item for opening the appointment of the FY 2024 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee members. To start off, I would like to go over a very brief timeline of the events leading up to the scheduled audit process for July. As additional background information, generally, the draft FY 2024 agreed upon procedures will be presented to the auditors, who will then incorporate any changes or updates that they might have. Following this, the auditors will then forward those changes to the audit subcommittee, who will then finally incorporate and review their own comments and updates. Following that, the agreed upon procedures will then be finalized and presented to the ITALK at the July 10th meeting. At this time, the ITALK is asked to appoint no more than 3 voting members for the FY 2024 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee. Just please note that the previous FY 23 subcommittee members were Sunny House, Les Hopper, and Mariam Babaki. And at this time, I would like to now ask the ITALK if there will be any volunteers for fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, Noel. First of all, do we have any public comments on this item?
We have no hands from the public. Thank you.
Okay. Noel, before we open it up to the ITALK members, could you maybe talk a little bit about time commitment for this particular subcommittee? How much is involved?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it might be prudent to ask some of the members who did serve in the prior timing. If you could provide your own experiences, that would be very helpful to me.
Okay, I will do that as well. Okay, but as far as timing of this whole process, it kicks in when?
So we start the process for presenting the auditors with the draft reports that'll begin in this month.
Okay.
And up to that point, we'll be presenting the finalized ones in July. And following that, the major responsibilities for the subcommittee would pretty much be to provide feedback on any issues during the audit process, which doesn't often happen. But until that point, we would then be, there wouldn't be any major commitments from my perspective.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, looking for volunteers. Mariam, you served on the audit subcommittee before? Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Took very minimal effort from me, so.
I'm sorry?
Took very minimal efforts from me,
Okay.
so, and I recommend somebody else.
Okay. She's not raising her hand. Okay, who would like to serve on the audit subcommittee? Volunteers.
I'm interested, Frank Rivera.
Frank, very good. Anyone else?
Sunny, I'm not a voting member, but I can also volunteer.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Okay, anyone else? We need one more, right? Up to 3, correct? I can do it again, so. Now, do we need to select the chair, vice chair? That's what my notes say, but, or that can be done later? Is that, the subcommittee can do that later? Very good. Okay. So we have three volunteers, Tracy Dagger, Frank Rivera, and Sunny House. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the appointment of these three members.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Mariam. You did something at least here. I need a second.
I'll second that, Frank. Rivera.
Okay. All right, please take a vote.
Thank you. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist.
Approve.
For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
Approved.
Contractor Construction is absent. For Finance Budgeting, Miriam Babaki.
Yes.
For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Frank Rivera.
Yes.
Licensed Engineer and Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition are absent, and that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're on our last item, and that is the ITALK annual report or the draft report. Zara will be presenting that with Adrian, right? Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the ITALK. I'm here today to present the first draft of the 2024 ITALK annual report. At its February 14, 2024 meeting, the ITALK directed staff to begin developing the 2024 annual report. Thanks to the staff's efforts, the first draft of the 2024 annual report has been completed for your consideration. Now I will go over each section of the draft. Please follow along with the copy in your agenda packet, and it's also on the screen. The annual report starts with a letter from the chair, which gives an overview of the ITALK's role and emphasizes the ITALK's commitment to transparency and accountability for projects funded by TransNet dollars, key accomplishments on transit projects, along with an overview of what the annual report covers. The first page also includes a table of contents and information about the ITALK members, such as their names and the areas of expertise they represent. The second page provides an overview of the ITALK goals, along with a status update for each goal. The summary of the FY 2024 Transit Triennial Performance Audit results starts on page 3, and the progress report on the implementation of recommendations from the FY 2021 and FY 2018 performance audits start on page 5 of the annual report. Page 7 of the report provides an overview of the fiscal and compliance audit results. I would like to mention that this section is still pending the final results of the FY 2023 fiscal and compliance audit and will be updated after the results are finalized and before the presentation of the annual report to the ITALK in July. On page 8, we have TransNet funding highlights for FY 2023 to 2027, along with charts comparing TransNet dollars to other funding types and the breakdown of funding by TransNet subprogram. Page 9 includes the TransNet project and program highlights, covering priority projects and key initiatives with descriptions of accomplishments and updating upcoming milestones. I would like to mention that this section includes SANDAG's major projects, not just those funded by TransNet dollars. Lastly, on page 13, there is a section on how readers can get involved, access ITALK meetings, ask questions, and more. Now that we have gone over the draft, I think it's important to mention that the timeline for the annual report has changed a little so that the Transit Triennial Performance Audit sections are completed with the most recent updates after the conclusion of the FY 2024 Transit Triennial Performance Audit. As a result, the reading of the 2024 ITALK annual report's first draft is being presented to you in June this year. Today, we're asking the committee to review the first draft and give any feedback and suggestion you may have. The final report will be brought back to you for approval on July 10. The ITALK's presentation of the annual report to the board is scheduled or July 26th. If the committee has suggestion or recommends any changes to the draft report, staff will gladly take that and begin incorporating them into the final report. Thank you for your time. That concludes our presentation. We are ready to hear your feedback and answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Zara. Okay, are there any public comments?
We have no comments from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of ITALK, do you have any comments? Questions? No? I do have a couple of questions. First of all, the cover of the picture on the cover, what is that? I know it's a railroad. Where is that? Why did you pick that?
Yes, I think.
You have all these beautiful projects. I want to know.
This was provided by our Bizcomm department. We
Okay.
kind of double check and see exactly what location this was at.
Well,
We could also offer different.
you have a
different
lot of other
graphics.
pictures I think you can use on that.
Noted. We'll find a more suitable
Thank you.
graphic. Thank you.
All right. I did mention this earlier to Zara, but on the ITALK goals, I think if you could double check to make sure the number of cities that came to speak at ITALK, that would be great, and update that. Also for the audit results, I'm wondering, since you've already made certain actions and made certain commitments, is it possible to have something from SANDAG in here to address the commitment that was made?
We can certainly do that. We can also add a link to the report, to the actual audit report and SANDAG's management response.
Well, it would be nice to just have a little blurb even in there, just because there was a lot of back and forth. This is so one-sided. I know you all have put a lot of effort into it, but if there is a way we can at least, the fact that you have assigned someone in the budget to oversee that, I think we need a little bit of that type of a commitment or response, at least to say SANDAG is doing something about this. I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost. You've made a lot of good commitments, so let's make sure, we have it in there. That would be my
We
input.
will add that.
Thank you. Okay, so now this is a draft report, but you're asking us to just review and discuss. Is there an action to no approval, right?
There's no action.
Okay, so it says
that is
action,
needed
that's
from
what I was
the
wondering. Okay, so we're good. Then if you have other comments, if just in case, the ITAC members review, or those that are not here review, what's the deadline to get comments back to you? Is this it, or are there any?
We are looking forward to getting your comments today.
Okay.
Because we have such a short timeline from today to the next meeting. And we just want to make sure that we have everything available and ready and incorporated into the final draft. Because there is a process that goes through. There are several staff members involved. And also, finalizing to the PDF. So it takes a little bit of time. So we appreciate if you can provide your feedback today. But if you have further comments, you can always email me and let me know.
Okay. So the intention is to bring this back to our July ITALK meeting for final approval. Is that right?
Correct.
And then it will be presented in July to the board.
In July.
Got it.
Correct.
Thank you, Zara. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, that concludes our agendized items. Is there anything else from ITALK members? Nope. Anything else from anybody else? Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is July 10th at 9:30. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the ITALK members, for being here to make sure we had a quorum. So,
Well done, Chair. Thank you.